Welcome to the DeepDraft Weekly Maritime Brief. Our objective today is to break down the intelligence from the May 3rd report.
Right.
And the key theme for this week's briefing is a fundamental shift in the Strait of Hormuz. The blockade there has moved away from broad kinetic denial into a very selective, compliance-driven transit regime.
Exactly.
Boarding operations, rigid transit gates, and regulatory screening have essentially replaced naval presence as the primary instruments of control.
And for your fleet operations, this changes the fundamental problem entirely. Access to Hormuz is no longer defined solely by physical security risk. It's now dictated by sanctions exposure, clearance protocols, and financial traceability.
Let's get right into the operational events that confirm this. Looking at April 28th and 29th, the intelligence confirms a dual-tier transit model has emerged. We saw the Russian-linked vessel Nord successfully clear the strait, while hundreds of other vessels remained blocked.
Which means this marks a definitive move away from blanket disruption.
Right.
Access is now selectively granted based on political, commercial, or compliance alignment. It's a calculated filter.
So the implications for vessel routing are immediate. Routing decisions must now factor in flag state and commercial ties above all else. Physical safety is entirely secondary to geopolitical alignment.
Precisely. And the deeper insight here is how the instruments of control have evolved. The risk is no longer just being fired upon. The real risk is permanent operational paralysis through targeted administrative denial.
Which brings us to the events of April 29th. The brief outlines a phase of precision enforcement.
Yes.
We saw the boarding of the Blue Star 3 and the redirection of 39 vessels. But concurrently, the Idemitsumaru was officially cleared for passage.
That proves the enforcement is precise. By clearing specific vessels, the controlling entities are showing that transit is technically possible.
But strictly under controlled, closely monitored conditions. For the vessels themselves, this means masters must prepare their bridge teams for precision boarding operations, as well as highly unpredictable routing changes directed by these controlling entities.
And look at the organizational intelligence required to execute this. The blockading force is actively differentiating targets. That means your vessel's entire data footprint is being actively evaluated in real time.
It's a high-speed audit.
It is.
Moving to April 30th and May 1st, we saw the formal introduction of the Hormuz Transit Gate. They are now limiting movement to exactly 6 daily passages.
Just 6.
Right. And currently, there are 41 tankers holding an estimated 69 million barrels immobilized offshore. This has prompted the proposal of a supervised reopening framework called the Maritime Freedom Construct.
Operationally, the corridor is now defined by a controlled scarcity of passage. It has transitioned from a localized maritime security crisis into a massive energy logistics and diplomatic bottleneck.
The tanker scheduling and energy supply reliability are structurally compromised at this point. Vessels caught in these holding patterns face prolonged offshore waits, which drastically increases collision risks.
And supply consumption.
Correct. They're burning fuel just to maintain position.
And this delay is no longer a temporary pause. A 6-vessel daily limit indicates a long-term structural restriction. It's going to require complex multilateral coordination for any kind of supervised reopening.
Adding to that complexity is the financial intervention. On May 2nd, the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, stepped in to bar Iranian safe passage payments.
Right.
Simultaneously, the Ford Carrier Group exited the region.
The timing there is critical. The center of gravity has officially moved from a naval standoff to financial attrition. Military presence is decreasing while the regulatory enforcement is intensifying.
So, operators attempting to secure transit via safe passage payments, even if they just want to move their cargo, now face severe sanctions exposure.
Yes, and the total loss of insurance defensibility.
Which is catastrophic.
Absolutely. The friction point is now financial compliance. Commercial movement will remain structurally constrained by these conflicting demands. You have the transit authorities holding the strait and Western sanctions enforcement holding the financial systems.
Which perfectly transitions into the final key event from the brief. There is a massive technology transition happening on the bridge.
The shift from AIs to VDES.
Exactly. Bridge operations are actively transitioning from legacy automatic identification systems to the VHF Data Exchange System.
And operationally, this is because legacy AIS is suffering from severe bandwidth saturation. It has limited data capacity and highly exploitable cybersecurity vulnerabilities, particularly in high-risk, congested waters like Hormuz.
So situational awareness for your masters can no longer rely solely on radar, ECDIS, and basic VHF voice traffic. VDES combines terrestrial and satellite data to provide much richer maritime safety info, vessel traffic services, and e-navigation.
But the deeper insight here is the friction of implementation.
Mm.
Hardware upgrades and training standards must happen concurrently.
Right, the human element.
If advanced systems like VDES are installed without aligned operational procedures, they risk becoming misunderstood tools rather than operational assets. Data overload on the bridge can be paralyzing.
Let's connect these events to look at the broader pattern recognition.
Okay.
The physical blockade in Hormuz and the technical transition on the bridge are really two sides of the same coin. Both represent a fundamental shift from simple identification to complex, structured data exchange.
Yes.
Access to the strait requires complex compliance proof, just as modern navigation requires higher capacity digital data flow.
And the emerging trend here is that the operating environment is becoming strictly data dependent. A vessel's digital footprint, its communications capability, and its financial traceability now dictate its operational freedom. Mismanagement of this data, whether that's a blocked safe passage payment or a saturated AIS signal, results in operational paralysis.
Which brings us to the strategic impact. Looking forward, broad kinetic threats are being permanently replaced by compliance attrition. Selective passage based on regulatory and financial profiling is the new baseline for strategic corridors.
So operators and masters need to interpret this carefully. You must manage sanctions exposure and advanced digital situational awareness simultaneously. Ensure your bridge teams are heavily trained on VDES architecture.
And your commercial teams have airtight compliance screening.
Correct. Because friction in either area is going to stall your vessel.
So to summarize the week's intelligence, the Hormuz corridor is now a managed transit regime governed by compliance and financial constraints, not just naval presence. Concurrently, the operational necessity of structured data exchange makes the shift to VDES a critical priority for bridge teams.
Operational success in this environment requires mastering both regulatory clearance and advanced digital communication.
Full analysis available on the DeepDraft.com.